everybody. My name is Brooklyn Walker. I'm one of Kelly's students. So I study illustration at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. So I thought I'd just tell a little bit about myself and just show you sort of my process, how I approach design, specifically character design. So I'm from Utah. I grew up in American Fork, which is not too far from Brigham Young University, so it's nice I can go home on the weekends. This is my husband. We've been married for almost 2.5 years, and he was super awesome for letting me come out here for a couple weeks. So this is my family. I come from a really big family, but actually this isn't even all of us. So I'm the little one down at the bottom. So we have 6 girls total. This probably seems crazy to a lot of you. And then this is all 9 of us. And so we're kind of a rowdy bunch, and I actually draw a lot of inspiration from my family. I love them a lot, and I think some of my experiences are really important for the drawings that I do, and they help to inform a lot of my design decisions. So one of the reasons I'm here is because I serve my mission in Portugal, just like Kelly does. There's a mission for our church, and so I served in Porto, down in Amadora and Lole and Algarve, and over in the Azores, so sort of all over the map. And so I learned Portuguese, and I learned to really love the people, and so Kelly invited me to come back here to show some of my work to you guys, and to see the island, and do some research just on kind of your culture and history, and so it's been really fascinating. So next up for me, actually when I return from this trip, I'll graduate in just a couple days from Brigham Young University. And then I will be headed off to an internship at Sony Pictures Animation, if you guys are familiar. These are some of the movies they've done. I thought I'd show a few examples. And so that will be just for the summer, and so we'll just kind of see what happens after that. And so the main thing that I am interested in doing is sort of the visual development that happens before the designs are passed on to the animators and the riggers and the modelers, and so kind of developing the look of the film. So I think one of the main things I want to talk about is the project that I just completed. So in the illustration department, each student has like a senior capstone, and so this was my DFA project. I did visual development for Little Orphan Annie. Are you guys familiar with that story? It's like the rags to riches story of a redhead, curly-haired girl who is adopted by this billionaire, Oliver Warbucks. So anyways, I did sort of the visual development, mainly character design for this. So this is the show, all set up in our facilities at BYU. There's my husband and some other students who completed the projects as well. So one of the main things that I want to talk about is, I think the first step of good design and development is research. And so I did a lot of research for this project, Little Orphan Annie. What most people don't know is that this actually started as a poem in the 1880s. Although most people know it from the musical or the films. And so it started in the 1880s, and then it was a comic strip, a daily comic strip series by Harold Gray that went on for about 100 years. There was a radio broadcast, and there was a musical, and then there were all these films that were done about it, and so it was super popular. Oops, I don't know if this is. Okay.
That's me.
Sorry, guys. Anyway, so I did all this research on this project because it's really important to really know your subject, to know what the material is in order to inform your research, or inform your work that you do. And so these are some of the drawings I did. Since there's so many different versions of Little Orphan Annie, I thought it would be really exciting to propose the idea of doing Little Orphan Annie as an animated film, so like a Disney or Pixar film. And so these are some of my drawings. As you can see, they all look a little bit different. Most of what character design is figuring out the look of the characters, and so it's important to do a bunch of different explorations. And so this is Miss Hannigan, the main orphanage lady. And so I had a lot of fun here. And so I tried to just figure out kind of what her personality was. And so the more that you know about the character or who they are, the better your drawings will be. And so that research is really key. Okay. Okay, so every year the animation department does a short film, and so this was development for this past year's animated film, which is Death and Delilah. And so I was really inspired by my experiences here in Portugal. And so this old lady was kind of my pitch and my proposal for Delilah, which is an old lady who's always escaping death, and she lives for hundreds of years, and she's always somehow able to outwit him. And so these are just sort of my explorations of her, and I had a ton of fun with it. And so I think one of the main things of character design is just getting in a lot of mileage, just trying a lot of different solutions and not settling very quickly. So some of these were a little bit further on. We decided we want it to be sort of a two-dimensional thing, but done three-dimensionally. Okay, another thing I always am trying to improve at is observation and gesture drawing. So once you've done your research and you're exploring the character, it's really important to keep up the habit of figure drawing or gesture drawing and observing the world around you, trying to find different solutions, because a lot of things have been done before. Character design is something that's been done for 100 years, a little over, for as long as animation's been around. So it's important to get inspiration and pull sort of the life from the things that you see around you. And so gesture drawing is a really big part of what I do. And just a few samples of some of my observations. And then I thought I would show you things we've done on this trip so far. So these are just some gesture drawings of people on the street. And we just had a blast going through the streets and just sort of learning more about Madeira. You guys have a beautiful island. You've got lots of tourists. And I think it's really fun. So I'm sorry they're not super great images. I just kind of took them with my phone. But this is a setup of the festival. This is on the beach. And so I think with gesture drawing, the main thing is getting sort of the essence or the heart of what's happening, not sort of copying or just sort of like getting the essence of what you see. Sorry, guys. So yeah, I think the main thing I try to do is simplify things down to the essential lines to get sort of the attitude or the feeling of what people. I don't know what these are called. Somebody told me, but the people down in the near the festival flowers, they're doing this dance, the traditional dance with their outfits, and I thought it was super cool. Pigeons, pigeons, some are tourists, girl in a flower dress. And then beforehand, Kelly had me do some drawings for the historical figures, and so I know Columbus was really involved in the sugar trade here, and so did some drawings of him, just kind of exploring different styles and kind of figuring out what would be the most appealing character. João Zarco and Gustavo Teixeira. And so some explorations of them. There's some more, sorry they're kind of rough. And then there's Cece, some different sort of figures, and that's it. Thank you very much. Questions for me?
First of all, thank you for the presentation. Really lovely work.
Thank you.
The question I was thinking is, what's your process of iterating through different for example, you showed the same character had different different visual styles.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any process on how to develop all these different styles within the same character?
I think it depends on the project. So like for Annie, I was trying to shoot for a similar, well, I guess eventually I funneled into a similar style. But I think for the most part, just finding good shape language, if you're familiar with that. So with Miss Hannigan, the larger women, I tried to find ways to vary her shapes and the sizes of different things, so big, medium, and small, and tapering other shapes, if that makes sense, so that it reveals more about who she is and so that it reflects what kind of character she is. And so it doesn't always work this way, I don't think, but when certain shapes tell certain things about people, and so like the sharper shapes are more aggressive and fast and more severe, and then the softer shapes, round, and they're more comfortable and at ease, and things like that. And so I think working those into your characters can really tell a lot about them. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Anyone else?
Good.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Let's watch a movie.
Okay. We'll use this to start. My name is Kelly Loosli. I'm a professor at Brigham Young University in the United States, and I do speak some Portuguese, but not very well. It's been a long time. I'll actually show you pictures of me when I lived here in 1990, because it's funny, because I had hair. When I was talking with Raphael about what I was going to speak about, he said, well, share something that's sort of pertinent to you, and I never planned on being a teacher. I used to make fun of teachers or professors. I thought they were losers, and that's what I am now. But let me tell you about first of all, I'll tell you about my journey, much like Brooklyn did, and then I'll tell you how we developed our program at Brigham Young University and give you a little background, because I think it's interesting. I think a lot of us in the arts, I think many of you are in the arts, and I think we think to develop the individual artist, you have to focus on the person. When we decided to start a program at Brigham Young University, it's not an art school, it's a university. It's extremely hard to get into, so people are academically very strong, which tends to mean they're not as artistic. Maybe that's not true in Europe. But the artists in America don't get good grades because they're drawing all the time, they're goofing around. So we tend to get what we call smart artists at Brigham Young University, because the university is really challenging to get into. The university is about 35,000 people, that's how big the school is. It used to be the largest private university in the United States. I probably should read my title for you. Developing the individual artist through an emphasis on collaboration. Using the studio collaborative work process in the university environment as a tool to develop the artist as an individual. That sounds sort of academic and smart, right? Kind of? I'm not like your MIT guy who's super smart. That's funny. Esta é minha família. That's it. That's all. Big thing. All right. When I was 4 years old, I saw Bambi, and in the 1970s, nobody went to see Disney films without taking a child. They would be embarrassed to go see these films without taking a child. And I was the perfect age to go to these films. So my aunts, my uncles, avós, the spies, I kept seeing Bambi and over again. Have you seen Bambi? The mom dies. Over and over again I was seeing the mom dying. And that's why I'm so disturbed today. I became fascinated with animation, and my father explained to me how it worked, and I began to design, right? I started to draw all the time I was drawing. And all through elementary school, when I was in 5th grade, so 10, 11 years old, the movie Fox and the Hound came out, and I was really good at drawing those characters, and I was selling all these drawings to kids at school, and I got in a lot of trouble because I guess their parents didn't want them spending money on my drawings, but tough. Sorry, this is all right. When I was 12, I went and spent the day at a studio that was making this really horrible cartoon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah. It ended up being something that lots of people loved, but as an 11-year-old snob, do you know what snob is? An elitist, I thought I was better. I was a Disney purist. I went and I watched them working on this, and I was like, this is garbage. At 11, I was like, this is horrible. I'm too good for this. So I stopped doing this, and at the same time, there was a commercial in the United States that became really popular for the claymation raisins. Did they come to? Did you ever see any of this? It's horrible too, but I loved it. What's funny about this is it was a commercial to advertise raisins. I don't even know the word for raisins in Portuguese. Passas. To advertise passes in America, and the characters became more popular and made more money as characters than the whole raisin industry did in the United States. And they had Christmas specials and Easter specials, and I became obsessed with stop motion. Okay? I started making stop motion in my parents' basement, and I was discovered by a local advertiser. Oh, this is me. Oh, I should back that up. Oh, that's me in Mexico. But from the time when I was 14, I was discovered by an advertiser, and they wanted to do clay animation TV commercials, and so my parents gave them permission because I wasn't old enough to drive. They would drive out to my parents' house, pick me up, and we would work for like 3 days straight. We would sleep at the studio, and we would work, and as a 15-year-old, I was making more money per hour than my dad did, making TV commercials. From the time of 15 to 18 until I went to the university, I think I made 18 different TV commercials. And this is in the 1980s. I think I was making $10 an hour to sculpt and about $30 an hour to animate. That was pretty good. In the 80s, that was pretty good money. That's okay money now. That was pretty good money for a little kid. My freshman year, I went to Brigham Young University, and then obviously you sort of put together, we're Mormons, ustedes con esos elders. I was an elder here. The first 8 months of my mission, I was in Mexico. When I've been back to Madeira, people are like, oh yeah, you guys are the guys that brought basketball. And I was like, yes. And we played a lot of basketball, coached a lot of basketball in Mexico. That's what Mexico looked like. That's back when the soccer field, compared to the playa. Anyway, that's what, that'll come full circle here in a second. I was too tall to live in that house, by the way. I had to like punch down something else. When I returned from my mission, I made a clay animated film myself. I worked moving furniture to pay, to raise money, and I spent $4,000 and made a clay animated film. It took me 18 months to make. The set was about 4 feet by 8 feet. Anyway, I made a film and finished it, and then went back to the university and said, here's my film, help me finish it, and I won a student Emmy. So the Television Academy Awards give out the Emmys. I won a student Emmy for this. And I was dating my wife at the time. She was just my girlfriend, and I could only invite one person to the ceremony, so I invited her because I didn't want my parents to argue. And so then she thought I was going to be somebody special because we went to Hollywood to this very amazing ceremony, you know, in tuxedos and the whole thing. Anyway, so that's how I pulled her into marrying me. If you notice that she was really pretty and I'm very ugly, that's how it worked out. This clay animation thing fooled her into liking me. After I made my clay animated film, I graduated from Brigham Young University. There's me winning my award. Oh, when I was here, by the way, because I had red hair, I was called Tintin. Everyone, oh, Tintin, they got Tintin. Oh, Tintin. That's what everybody called me here. After that, we moved to Los Angeles, and I worked at DreamWorks at the very beginning days of DreamWorks. So I worked on Prince of Egypt. If you've seen Prince of Egypt. Prince of Egypt. And then, I don't know if you'll recognize this artwork, but I worked on the original version of Shrek. This was for Shrek. We were making Shrek for the comedian Chris Farley. Do you remember Chris Farley? Tommy Boy? So this is Chris Farley. When he OD'd on drugs and died, we all got fired that day. We were at work and they said, Chris Farley's dead, go home. That was exactly what happened. And I was like, oh, great. The next day I got hired back to work on Spirit. Because I'm from Utah, I was actually one of the few people at the studio who had saddled and ridden horses, and I was sort of like a cowboy to them, although I'm from the suburbs, so it didn't make any sense. But I worked on this film for quite a while. Let's let this play through. After that, after DreamWorks, I went and worked for Buena Vista Motion Pictures, which is the live action division of Disney. So they make all the movies that come out under these brands. Let me let those brands pop up. So anything you see that comes out of these companies is all out of one office. That's just marketing. We all know about that stuff, right? The year I worked there, we made A Sixth Sense, Summer of Sam, Civil Action, 13th Warrior, Armageddon. If you remember Bruce Willis in Armageddon. Mighty Joe Young, the big gorilla movie. Anyway, it was a great year. Moving on. This is Brigham Young University. We are right up against the mountains here. The university is at 4,500 feet above sea level. If you are aware of the Sundance Film Festival, Sundance, the ski resort, is just about right here. It's a 15-minute drive from our university. That's where we're located. Anyway, after I worked for Disney, while I was at Disney, we had a lot of family members die. And so my wife and I didn't have children, so we moved back to Utah to take care of family. And then the university found out I was back and said, hey, will you help us start an animation program? And they asked me, once we started the program, and I was working for an independent studio as well at the same time, they said, what will you do to make it different? Because it's a university, it's not an art school, how are we going to make this varied? And I said, when I was at DreamWorks or Disney, there was no individual work. Everything was created in sort of a team environment, right? Animação é futebol. It's team, it's all about the team. And so that's what we did to create our program, is we set it up to take advantage of what studios do and do well. So here's just a couple little films and then I'll go through how our program works. One of the things we did, first of all, was we looked at what the studios did, and we have a connection with Ed Catmull. Do you know Ed Catmull? Created Pixar. He's from Utah. So we went to Ed Catmull and said, what do you think we should do? And he said, your students are really smart, you should focus on these things, and then just simulate the studio environment. So this is how you get into our program if you want to come to Utah and study with us. The first year the students take 3 prerequisite courses. They take a figure drawing course. We believe figure drawing is the cornerstone of everything for us. Turns out movies tend to be about humans, so you have to be able to draw them, even though most of what we do is 3D. Then you take an intro to 2D animation class, so it's hand-drawn animation, and then you take a 3D animation class. That's the basics for us. After that, you apply to our program. The application is 5 to 10 figure drawings, 2 to 5 3D models, a sketchbook, and a 2D animation sample, and then there's another category where you can put whatever you want. Photographs, other art, sculptures, photos of sculptures you made, anything else. We will review those applicants, and out of the 100 to 125 students that apply, we take 25. So it's pretty competitive. We also participate with the illustration program, which is where Brooklyn is studying, and then there's a computer science program that has an animation emphasis that works with us as well. After that, the students have classes in large groups and they stay in the group all through their school. And they're forced to work collaboratively on projects, and before the faculty give comments on their projects, the students have to critique each other. It could get very ugly very fast, but they learn how to give feedback and critiques without being cruel. Apparently I'm not good at that, is what I've been told. After that, at the end of their 3rd year, the students, we have an open presentation, they pitch ideas, and they vote on one story idea for their large group films. And we do the same thing for video games. They pitch a game, so we make 1 video game, 1 film a year. Then they choose their student director and their student producer, and because we are lazy, then we just hand it off to students, they do all the work, and we just watch. And if we as teachers have done our job, we have to do very little guidance, because at that point the students know how to run their program, they know how to run their film, they know how to deal with each other, they know how to give feedback, and that's how we have created what we've created. We've now been competing with films for 13 years. We've won 18 student Emmys, 5 Student Academy Awards. We've made 4 video games, 3 of which have made it into E3, if you know what E3 is. E3 is a gamers-only conference. They take 5 games a year. We've made 4 games. We've gotten in 3 times. We've done pretty good. Mostly because, as you saw, we live up in the mountains and it snows and there's nothing to do, so you just live in the lab. That's why the students, well, they're a little sunburned now, but they were really, really white before I brought them to the island. Because all of our labs are in basements. There's no light. They don't see any light ever. It is the program of really, really, really white people. This is one of our labs. I don't know, this is somewhat common. I know it's not as common everywhere, but we use, these are Hewlett-Packard workstations with Cintiqs. So we animate just straight into the computer. 2 years ago we left paper. Before that we were all paper. Now we're just, and I actually have a mobile one in my desk, in my bag, if you want to see that after this, I can show you that. This lab has 15 Cintiq workstations. Our 3D lab is dual monitor, so you have a monitor and a Cintiq, and then you have a workstation. And I'm going to address your question. On the 2D side, we teach Toon Boom Harmony, we teach Toon Boom Storyboard Pro, and we teach TV Paint. On the 3D side, we use Maya, Houdini, and what are we compositing? And Nuke. Also, we use Photoshop and After Effects a ton. We were just over talking to an elementary school, primary school, and they were very excited about things. And I was talking to some of the good teachers. Just because we have these resources doesn't mean good product comes out of it. And just because people have less resources, you can do amazing things. Certainly this makes it easier, but I wasn't working with this stuff as a student, and I want a student Emmy, right? So the only limit we find is in students and their imagination and their ability to believe in themselves. So we are extremely hard on our students. We push them, we chain them to the desk and keep them in the basement working on something. We push them really hard, but there's the promise that it will go someplace, right? And I know a lot of Portuguese people are like, yeah, well, we don't really have a big animation industry. When I worked at DreamWorks, there were 24 different languages spoken. There were no Portuguese people there. There were Italians, there were French, there were Brazilians, there were French, there were English, there were French, and there were Canadians and Americans. There should have been Portuguese. Why weren't there Portuguese? Nobody works harder than the Portuguese. Have you seen this island? You terraced this island. You turned something that shouldn't have been inhabitable into the most amazing place. I think Portuguese people should have that sort of vision, get great, and go out and start to dominate. We could really use different stories, different perspectives, different things to influence us, because we're all tired of white guys telling the same stories over and over. Here, I'm going to share just a little bit of artwork with you. This is the current film that we're working on right now. It's the story of Beowulf. Do you know the story of Beowulf? We decided to tell it from the reverse point of view. So this is Grendel's version of what happened with Beowulf. So the monster is telling the story about its experience. So this is Grendel up top, the monster. These are some iterations and different versions. This is what Beowulf looks like. And what you'll notice is he has a beard here and here, and then he doesn't here. He was too wimpy to grow a beard. So a little hairy Viking holds on to his ears and just hangs from his ears, so it looks like he has a beard. But otherwise he looks like that with a teeny little chin. It's pretty funny. And this is the beard guy. So that when he's on his face, he looks like that. Kind of funny. But this is all designed by students. Then we model it and create it in 3D. Then we also, students design all the environments. Brooklyn, this is actually Brooklyn's work, her drawings. They design all the environments and then start to, I'll show you some turnarounds, 3D works after. This is a 3D model of what Beowulf looks like in the film. They do color studies to try to figure out how we're going to handle the textures, the skinning of the characters. More color studies, that's a painting one the students did. Am I totally boring? Are you okay? Are we all right? It seems really hot in here, but maybe I'm just... Right. It won't play this file, so let's just keep going. Anyway, then my students have gone on to win lots of awards. Kind of cool. It's protected my job. winning awards for the games. This is some of the places my students work. Wedded Digital is in New Zealand. They're famous for the Lord of the Rings films, the King Kong film, Avatar. I'm trying to think what else. I've had a number of students go down there and work. We have a lot, I think we have 30 people at Pixar. If you saw Coco, one of my former students was in charge of all the clothing in the film. He came and gave a presentation at school, which is pretty great. Disney Interactive video games. iPax is actually Sony. Blue Sky, the company that did Rio, Ice Age. I don't know what the titles are in Portuguese. We have a lot of people, not a lot, a handful of people at Industrial Light and Magic. They've made some films you might have heard of, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, a couple other things. They're pretty good. We have a lot of people at EA Games. Rhythm Hughes is an effects company. A bunch of people at Digital Domain Effects Company. DreamWorks, Walt Disney. And I don't have the list up here for video games, but we have a handful of people at Blizzard Games, at Riot, and at Valve. Those are sort of the bigger gaming companies we've placed people. Here's just some drawings from one of my students that I thought were really fun. Because of where we're located, we are an hour-and-a-half flight. It's essentially the same distance from Lisbon to Madeira as it is from Utah to California. So a lot of our students get really good internships. The girl that is directing this film did an internship at Disney. Where is she? Oh, she's right there. But she worked during the summer, worked through the summer for a Disney feature. We have lots of students doing really great internships. That's exactly what Brooklyn's going to do at Sony. Okay, so now let's go into some of our successes. Hiram Osman was the head of animation on Moana. I taught him years and years and years ago, doing a really great job. He actually just left Disney Feature, moved to Montreal. He's going to direct a feature version of the Nemo in Slumberland, if you've ever seen that old comic strip. I wasn't that familiar with it. Liz was one of our students. She went on to work for Disney Imagineering. And if you've ever been to Disneyland or Disney World, they're the people that design all the rides, do all the props, paint all the scenes inside the parks. A fun job. This is one of my students named Anthony Holden. It's the guy with the beard. Some of his comics, he's got this huge following online, and he publishes books that people buy. And his real job is he storyboards for Sony. But on the side, he's developed this huge following. Precious Rascals is the name of his online thing if you want to follow him. He's a very funny guy. And his best friend is Jacob Wyatt. Jacob Wyatt directed a Usain Bolt commercial in the United States, and then he has an Acropolis comic that a French publisher is going to publish as a graphic novel in France. He currently is directing a TV episode, a TV special of Invader Zim for Nickelodeon. Kind of cool. This is Stacey Beathers. Stacey Beathers worked on How to Train Your Dragon 2. She did the textures for about half the dragons in the film. And then shortly after that, DreamWorks shut down their Palo Alto to San Francisco office. And they wanted her to move down to Los Angeles. And she said, no, I'm not interested, because her husband was in dental school. And they were trying to convince her. She's like, no, I've got 2 other offers. So she got to choose between Industrial Light and Magic and Pixar. And that's her eating lunch at Pixar. That's the inside of Pixar. So things worked out okay for her. I'm showing Alan real quickly, and I'll show his demo reel at the end. Alan did an internship for Blue Sky, and then was an animator. He animated on, let me think, Moana, I believe Wreck-It Ralph. I'm not sure. We'll watch his demo reel. But he works for Disney and his wife works for DreamWorks, so I don't know what happens at dinner time there. This is Tyson Murphy. One of the times I came here, I brought Tyson Murphy with me to Madeira. He lived here too as a Mormon missionary. He previously was the head of character design for World of Warcraft. I don't know if you've heard of World of Warcraft. It only had like 11 or 13 million subscribers at one time. His dad actually was a famous baseball player in America, which is kind of interesting. But he was the runt of the family. So he had brothers who played professional American football, but he was like the not talented one. So he only went on to be the head of character design for Blizzard. He now is designing a new game for Riot Games. And speaks Portuguese. And his parents came here and became obsessed with Brisa as well. I didn't tell you guys that. They hauled as much Brisa home as they could carry. This is Glenn Harmon. Glenn Harmon was a storyboard artist on Boss Baby and another of other DreamWorks films. He just left the studio to go help start a new studio. This will end. Hopefully this one. Oh, here's our #1 success on our program. This guy right here, his name is Dan Lemon. Dan Lemon was nominated 3 times for the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, and he won it for the orangutan in the Jungle Book live action movie, which I'm not sure why they call that the Jungle Book live action movie, because only the little boy is live action, everything else is fake in that movie. But Dan Lemon is probably the most successful, and he lives and works in New Zealand at Weta. That's kind of cool. Here's just a few things I thought I would share, things I've learned. There's a man who has donated a lot of money, a lot of the equipment you saw this gentleman gave. He gave over $350 million to universities in the United States because he just supports education. And he's somebody who can figure his way out of anything. Do you know those kinds of people? They're very sneaky. He bought a house on an island off the coast of San Diego, California, and they had a rule that you couldn't build a new house without their permission. So he tore the house down to 1 board and told them it's not a rebuild, it's a remodel. And then built it over, and they didn't know what to do. They just kind of stood around. Anyway, so think different and problem solve. That's what I learned from Ira. Plus, rich people are sneaky or something. Sneaky. This is Ed Catmull, creator of Pixar. His real belief is you surround people who are smarter or more talented than you and allow them to help you become successful. Don't be threatened by them. Work with them and get better and more success. He was really good friends with Steve Jobs, which I'm not sure what that says about him. And then there's this guy, if you've heard of him. By the way, I met him once at a party. I went to a party that I kept going through all the security. I got invited to this party, and I didn't know why there was so much security. There was security at the base of the hotel, and then to get onto the elevator, there was security, and then to go up at the top of the elevator, you got out in security, and it was a hotel with a pool on top. And as you came out, they checked you again. And I was walking around, I couldn't figure out why it was such a big deal. And then there was a group of people surrounding this really, really short guy. And it was him. He's tiny. Anyway, it was a party that I went to with George Lucas, so my one claim to fame. Except for the fact that I lived on Madeira when Cristiano Ronaldo was like 5. So that's my other claim. One thing that's interesting about George Lucas is, if you've heard of him, is that they moved Industrial Light and Magic. You all know the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. On the one end of the Golden Gate Bridge is the Presidio. It's an old military base, U.S. military base. And they allow businesses to come in now and start building businesses there. Well, he built his business right here. This is the Industrial Light and Magic building. And there was this park to the side, and it was just grass, and he thought it was really ugly. He's like, that's just a lot of grass, that's ugly. And, you know, as rich people do, they start to think and scheme. Well, he lives about an hour north of the Golden Gate Bridge. And he was walking around his area and started to walk over into this other farmer's area and really liked this guy's farm. And so this is what he did. I think this is crazy. Maybe you're going to think I'm crazy for bringing this up, but he turned the park into that. And why is this unique? I don't know if you can see this, but they put in a river. If you see that river? That farmer had a river on his farm. He went to the farmer and said, I want to buy your river. And the farmer was, what? He said, I want to buy your river. He's like, sure, that sounds crazy. It's not my river, whatever. So I don't know how much it cost him, but they went in and using GPS, they marked every stone in the river, numbered the stones, and moved them stone by stone to this location because he liked the guy's river, and it's plotted out exactly the same way as it was on that guy's farm. Anyway, why is that interesting? Think different. Don't think with limits. That's crazy. Who would ever think that, right? But he doesn't ever, like his mind doesn't even conceive there's not limits, so I can buy this river and move it. And that's awesome. Or it's crazy. Either way, it's awesome. Right? Anyway, so there's a little bit of that. Let me show you a few. Anyway, starts going closer on the river. Let me show you a few things here real quick. That student that I showed you, Alan Ostergaard, here's his demo reel from Moana.
I am Moana. Fortunately, on my boat, sail across the sea and restore the heart of Te Fiti. I am Moana of Moana.
So he was the character animator on all those shots other than the one he noted wasn't his. See if I can get a few of these things to play. So these are just tests for that current senior film we're making. This is a test for the smoke that will come when the doors open. Actually, let me show you. This is what Beowulf looks like in 3D. The dragon spitting up little Vikings. Little render tests. I don't know why there was an orange box. This kind of shows you the texture on the character for Grendel. So it's a mixture of scales and fur. Kind of cool. I don't know why it's chugging, but there you go.
Is this all Maya or a combination between Maya and ZBrush?
It's typically we're a lot now. We're doing ZBrush models and then taking it into Maya and tweaking it. And, yes, we've actually just over the last 2 years added ZBrush. I'm glad you asked that because I would have forgotten ZBrush completely. This is kind of what a finished shot will potentially look like in the film. It's pretty good for student work. Testing if I have it. Here's some of the little animation tests we're doing for some of this is pretty old, so maybe I shouldn't be showing you this. Casino.
This is all harmony, right?
Yeah. Anyway, that's it. Questions? Yes.
Wow, Kelly, so it seems that you were really angry because of Bambi. So, have you thought perhaps of making an animation of keeping her alive?
Yeah, that would be great. Don't touch Disney characters, they will sue you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I am curious about the work process. You say that I think it's on the 4th year, you get the students on groups to work. So they pitch the project and then what is the process after?
Then they vote,
Uh-huh.
they get to vote, so as a group they choose the project, and then they get to decide which part of the process they want to work. So Brooklyn wanted to be a character designer, so she worked with a bunch of other people who wanted to be character designers. They designed the film. They've already voted and chosen their director and producer, so the director gets to choose which drawings they like. Then we have storyboard artists who do the story, and the director gets to guide them. So it's students guiding students through every step. And the students get to choose what parts of the process they want to work on based on what they hope to do as a job someday. Does that explain it?
Yes, and how long do they have to like?
A year.
A year?
A year.
How many people working?
And it can be anywhere from 15 to 40 people. Not much.
You only make short films in your college?
Yes.
University?
I don't know of any universities in the United States that make feature films. It's just too time consuming. What?
There's nobody around the world that should be making features. It's all
I'm sure it exists.
too time consuming.
It is still, it's very time consuming. If you all know the Pixar short films, Pixar plans on at least $1 million a minute for their short films. So if you were to think about the costs, I will tell you, it costs us about $150,000 a year for our student film, our senior film. The one I showed you, Metro, didn't cost that much. I think we spent $15,000 on that. But that was hand-drawn. But the larger group projects, because some of the work isn't stuff that students want to do, and so we pay to have students do that part of it. They're called teaching assistants. Both Paige and Noah are my teaching assistants, so they get paid to do a portion of the labor part of the work. But we've made movies for $25,000. We've made them for $150,000. Just depends on how much money we're able to raise every year. Anything else? No? Are you all hot, or is it just me? Are we all baking? All right. Well, I'm done. Thank you.